Gemini 20, a cafeteria. Now, Jones and Rudyard focus quite differently on this particular degree. Jones fairly straightforwardly makes the point that a cafeteria is a very good example of synergy, where various people do whatever they are skilled at doing or what they choose to do or whatever. A bunch of people are doing their own thing, and it comes together as a collective enterprise without which the society, the community couldn't function. So a cafeteria, there's a supply of food, and it extends to any supply of services or goods in the community. We have to pull together to get certain jobs done that need to be done. And a cafeteria is the example of that because it deals with food and so on. So when you're doing your work, don't necessarily think that you have to do it all, because you can't. You don't have to do it all because you can't anyway. Other people will be doing their bit, and it's really a lot more beneficial for all concerned if the bit that you do is the bit that you do well, or the bit that you really want to learn how to do well, that your enthusiasm gives you a clue is a good thing for you to do. So when we're doing jobs that we really don't like, we really, really don't want to do them, we're not very good, we don't enjoy it, and so on, something's a little bit wrong there. We ought to not have too much of that going on in our lives. It does seem inevitable that we're going to have some of the time where you need to do something you don't want to do. Yeah, okay. But not too much, not all of the time. Because the community is based on the idea that somebody else will want to do the very thing that you don't want to do. So Jones focuses on that, and it's not a particularly profound esoteric mystery. But it does make the point, which I think is very valid, that there is this thing called synergy. Synergy is where you get more output than the collective input, really, because of a principle of resonance and harmony. And if we don't find synergistic gains in what we're doing, then we're just not really doing it right, and we're losing out on the potential that we could gain. So a warning, therefore, not to take on too much of your own on your own head when somebody else might be able to share it with you. Now, the thing is that when we actually operate from a position of synergy, then superabundance develops. Great abundance can be found from this source of additional energy. And Rudyard focuses on that. What happens when we are in a position of superabundance? Now, on the level of food, something in the region of 40% of food is just thrown away in certain countries, I think America and Britain, for example, because so much is produced that it can be wasted, and nobody goes hungry in those countries very much anyway. So there's no evidence that it matters. Whereas, of course, in other parts of the world, there are hungry people. And we see what happens when a community gets caught up in the idea of there being always enough, in fact, always too much. This leads to waste, and waste is just not in keeping with the Earth's needs. The Earth's way of being is not wasteful. Everything gets used. And if you operating a garden, for example, then you'll learn that. You don't throw anything away. Any old piece of equipment, any broken cup in the kitchen, you take it to the polytunnel or the greenhouse or whatever, and it is useful for keeping seeds in, or any old piece of wood would be useful for shoring up a bank, or you can find a use for everything. You don't throw things away when you're keeping a garden. And this is an earth mystery. The earth is teaching us something here. And in the recent fears that surrounded us because of the pandemic, a lot of people were afraid they wouldn't have enough to eat. That's kind of where you go with your fear. If there's a really big emergency, you start thinking about the basics, like have you got enough to eat? And I was having a conversation at one point with my sister, who's been living in Switzerland for a very long time. And when I visited her, her table was absolutely filled with chicken and ham and steaks and cheeses and wines, and it was completely abundant. I mean, like, it was a banquet for me. And I said, wow, why did you go to all this trouble? And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, this lunch. She said, well, this is what I eat. This is. She was living in this way of superabundance all the time, and whereas I would take a roast chicken and eat it over the next 2 or 3 days as soup and cold meat and so on, she would throw it away when she'd used it once, and I just couldn't understand this. And we had a discussion about food and whether we would ever actually have to suffer hunger. And she was concerned about this, that she might have to be hungry one day. And I said, well, why would I ever be hungry? I don't waste food. I just eat everything I buy, mostly. I don't waste food. So why should I be hungry then? It just seems so obvious to me that if you don't want to be hungry, you don't waste food. And that seems to be a formula. And if you don't want to be poor in financial terms, then you don't waste your money buying silly things like fashionable clothes that go out of fashion about 6 months after you've bought them and stuff. I mean, there's a very simple formula here, which if you don't waste things, you don't ever run out. Waste not, want not. So Rudyard's focusing on what we do when we've got an abundance, not only of food. He goes one step further and he says, take this principle to the level of mind. What happens when we've got too many things to think about, too much going in our minds, where we can take entertainment wherever we want it? We've got many friends, we've got Facebook conversations, we've got Twitter, we've got all of this stuff clouding our clear thinking. We can't cope. And most people have got too much going on. Very few people can say, yeah, I can fit you in easily. Yeah, they'll fit you in sometime next week, but not today. Of course not today. I'm always busy. Most people have got this busy way of being, as though they're trying to prevent silence entering their lives, prevent time out, time off, when there's nothing to do but be who you are without doing. And Rudyard suggests that this is a problem, that we should not fill our lives chock-a-block. We should not allow there to be no space in a day, no space in a week, so that you just can't fit in new things that arise. And if you actually live your life in such a cluttered, busy way, where all of your time, all of your space, all of your money is taken up, then where is the inspiration going to find a place to enter your life? There's no room. There's no room for new things to occur. And you put a scope, a ring fence around your life, and you say, this is enough for me. I don't want any new input if you fill your life. Whereas if you leave space, then what comes in is what is drawn in by the appetite of the soul for inspired experiences. So, a complex degree, this one, Gemini 20, mainly to do with synergy, but also the dangers of the superabundance that comes from synergy, and how to deal with that. And we do find a way to deal with that by saying no. We have to refuse some things. If somebody offers you something that's more than enough, learn to say no. Try this with food. Try this with income. Try this with invitations. Don't do as many social events. Don't take on as much work for clients. Don't take on more food than your body can digest. Because if you can't digest anything, whether it's in the mind or in the physical body, if you can't digest it, then it becomes unhealth. This is what will eventually kill you. And this does happen on the mental and emotional plane as well as the physical. We become in danger of such unhealthy ways of being that it shortens our enjoyment period of life, shortens our life sometimes.